So now we will be having the briefing, the topic of it, overview of the investment market in Ukraine. We'll be discussing what's happening with investments in Ukraine.
Так, тепер краще. Доброго дня.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry that we are somewhat late. The news is bad. Sevki will be here, but unfortunately Andriy Kolodyuk is in the airport with Aeroflot. And Roman Semenuha, who had to be here, is in the government. Well, there's the Council of the Coalition, and I believe the three of us will be able to tell you everything that we want. Let us start from saying who we are, then we will make a brief presentation on the market of investments in Ukraine, on association, what we have been doing, what are the plans, and I believe we will tell you many interesting things. I am Jaanika Merilo. I am the Managing Director of the Ukrainian Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, Yaroslava Johnson. Не чути. Yeah. I am Yaroslava Johnson. I am the President and the Executive Director of Western East Enterprise Fund. And Sevki Acuner will join us because the media center has moved. We all came to Ukraina Hotel. If someone can change the slides. Talking briefly about the association. The association was founded in September last year. We have been here for 6 or 7 months, and today we have 35 members. The funds starting from ventures funds that invest into startups, to big funds like EBRD and the World Bank, who are making not just direct investments but who give loans. And we are also members of European Association, and that was not a simple process. We were looking at the processes. They were looking at whether we correspond to European principle, the principle of transparency, whether our leadership corresponds to it, or managers, whether that's all correspond to all the requirements. And we have become members, and now for the first time we are part of the European investment market, and we will tell what that means. You're welcome. Now let us welcome Mr. Sevki. So we would like to welcome the President, the head of the EBRD, Director of EBRD. Now the pair.
A few moments to breathe before we come then to EBRD, if you don't mind. Тоді у нас працює 4 комітети.
So we have 4 committees, And the main thing is that last year, in the end of the year, we submitted the memorandum to the government where we say what the government should do to improve the business investment climate. I will tell what the memorandum means. We were talking about it a lot, but we are now ready to publish it, to send it to all interested parties. Together with Roman Semenuha, with Samopomich party, we submitted 3 draft laws to the Verkhovna Rada, which are to improve the investment climate. One of them, which allows to convert the credits, turn it into the capital. Those who understand what investments mean will understand that that is an important instrument. We were working on different seminars. It is very important also that last year our investors, our members invested almost $1.5 billion. They were doing it, they were giving loans, but that is very important. When we say that there are no investments in Ukraine and that no one makes investments, this is not exactly true. They make investments, maybe the investments are not that big. Sometimes these are indirect investments, sometimes these are loans, but it's important. When we say that everyone runs away from Ukraine, no. Every week there is one investment made, very small, very often into the venture funds. It's not important, the investments are made. And last year we had a review of the market and we looked at 67 investments. Most of them are venture investments into IT companies, but it is important sign that they are here. And also there were 6 or 7 investments into private equity, not venture investments, but we don't know about all of them. There are some investments made which we do not know about. They are small, and that is small part, that is some part of the market. So basically almost 100 million of direct investments into venture funds, into industry. But again, I would like to mention there are investments. We continue, and our members and some new investors are investing and will continue to invest into Ukraine. And for the first time, we as the association, we have made our small contribution into European Association. We published investors are investing and will continue to invest into Ukraine. And for the first time, we as the association, we have made our small contribution into European Association. We published our review of the market. The next slide, please. You can see, I hope that you can see, because you can see that Ukraine is not really the last one there, talking about the amount of investments as the percentage of GDP. We hope that this year will be better. I know that next year will be definitely better, but it is important to understand where we are. And when we say that no one wants to invest, well, today we will tell you what are the investors who invest into Ukraine. Maybe we will start with your...
Appreciate that, because we have to run to another meeting shortly. So
We have also
thank you very much.
broadcast that
Thank you very much. Yes, you're right. I think that in different shapes and different sizes, the pace of investment is there. But sometimes it's not always very visible, or it doesn't catch the headlines because these are not big investments. Nevertheless, entrepreneurs are looking to invest in the country. I think, taking it to EBRD's level, what I want to say is our commitment to invest in Ukraine continues just as strongly as it has always been. Last year, as you know, in the previous meeting I mentioned that we invested in total 1.2 billion euros. This year, we're going to try to hit similar numbers. I can't tell you whether it's going to be 900 or 1 billion, but we have a very strong pipeline at the moment of both private sector and public sector projects in infrastructure, in agribusiness, in manufacturing and services. This year we're talking certainly in quite advanced stage to a couple of information technology based companies. So I'm highly confident that our level of engagement will continue. Since we are talking about equity, just wanted to give you a very brief flavor of what we do in EBRD in equity. We work across the entire spectrum of equity investments. We do it by ourselves on a one-to-one transaction basis, and these could be full risk or sort of a tunnel investment, or even sometimes fixed return investments where our position is needed to improve the capital and the governance structure of the enterprise. We also invest through as a fund of funds, and that's a very significant part of our business as well. In Ukraine, we have, I'll tell you in a second, or I can tell now, we are invested in Sigma Blazer, AVentures, Dragon, ADM, Mezzanine Capital Management, and these funds have significant investments in Ukraine, as a matter of fact. The total amount of equity investments in Ukraine for us is 440 million since 1992, and at present we have 380 million euros in 21 companies that is deployed. And what we do, of course, as part of this investment is not just our money, but we help mobilize other private investors, particularly when it comes to the fund of funds type investment, where we are usually the anchor investor, the first one to come off the blocks and help the fundraisers pull the rest of the investors in. At EBRD, we have made 340 investments, cumulatively equity investments, totaling 6.3 billion euro over the years. And in combination with that investment, there was additional 9 billion of co-investment that was mobilized from other sources. So that is where I think our sort of the real value added comes in as an equity investor, that about 1.5 to 2 times at least as much money is then mobilized by through other investors. The equity investments represent 15% of our total annual commitments per annum, so that translates into around 900 million to €1 billion of direct investments each year. So that is how we look at it. I think this year, just to reinforce what you were saying, I think there are a few people who are looking to raise funds to invest in Ukraine. At least I'm aware of a couple, maybe there would be more, 2 or 3. And we are seriously looking at those to support, and hopefully that will give them enough of a support and lever to raise funds from other sources to really come up with the most needed form of risk capital in the country. So I'll conclude here, and thank you for the invitation. I'll just run away in a few moments, but I'll listen as much as I can to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Я хочу
I just would like to tell what our fund is doing. Western NIS Fund was founded in 1994 by the US government. That was one of 10 funds that was oriented towards helping development of small and medium-sized companies in the former Soviet countries. Our fund was for Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus. Belarus was just the country where Lukashenko did not allow us to work, and we worked in Ukraine and Moldova. Our starting capital was $150 million. We invested during the first years into 118 companies and created 25,000 jobs. Our first objective was to bring the standards of market economy into each of the companies and the best practices, best Western practices, best US practices. And then we saw that we had to organize trainings for senior management, for our directors, and we trained more than 1,000 entrepreneurs who work in different businesses in Ukraine. After 15 years, we stopped our investment activities and we started selling our assets. We sold almost all the assets, only 6 are on our balance, and in the beginning of 2015, we started the next stage of our development, providing technical assistance to Ukraine and Moldova, and that is $10 million for 3 years. The first program is called the Program of Economic Leadership. We understand that to train young leaders for Ukraine who are professionals, who can work in the government and in the business is very important. And that program is in place already, and we will announce who are the first such trainees who will be sent to the US to get MBA. And this will be 8% from Ukraine and 2 from Moldova. Then the program also includes the following. The Ministry of Trade requested us to train the CEOs of 50 biggest companies, and that's on corporate governance. And we are sending a group of young Ukrainian entrepreneurs. Jaanika will go with them. They are in the age of from 16 to 20. These are young entrepreneurs, and they will go to Silicon Valley, and they will meet the Ukrainians who work there. They will spend the week there, and then they will have better understanding of how young entrepreneurs in the US and in other countries develop their activities. Our next program is the program of assisting export. We work in close cooperation with the Ministry of Economy because they are working on that topic, and we will soon have a roundtable with them where we get together all the heads of the departments of the ministry, and we will start discussion on how to organize the trade policy of Ukraine and how to develop export. We also want to prepare training materials for exporters. We want to have the list of all the exporters of Ukraine so that we can help them technically, so that small companies who want to go abroad know how to find the market. Also, because we were doing it, we were working with small and medium-sized businesses all the time. We also have 2 programs which are just starting. And these are the programs which are focused on small and medium-sized companies, businesses. One of them is working with the social companies that will be helping the poorest population in Ukraine. We will be providing loans so that the small companies can help IDPs, women, disabled, military who return from ATO, so that they can develop their careers. And one more program that we are starting, it's called Local Economic Development. Here, this will be for the administration of the municipalities will get the administrators together with the businessmen, and this program will be concentrated also on small and medium-sized business. Our task was education for entrepreneurs so that Ukraine has a good base of professionals, and also we are focused on development of small and medium-sized companies. We know that SMEs in different other countries, like in the US, they account for 92%, in Canada 90%, and in Ukraine it's just 7%. So there's a place for Ukrainian economy to grow and to prosper. Thank you. Esteemed colleagues, do you have any questions? You're welcome. If I may, I just wanted to also let our guest go. So last year, as it has been mentioned, we submitted the memorandum to the government from investors, what is important for the investors to improve investment and business climate. The next page, if I may, we will publish this memorandum on our page, uvk.eu. To explain what we mentioned is of importance for the government. We asked the investors, the biggest problem was not the war. Of course, the war is a big problem, but why investors are not entering the market. They're looking whether they should go. That is the judicial system and corruption, two biggest obstacles. This is the big problem. Corruption is a huge problem. We understand the war is the issue of time, and this will be resolved. Israel lives with war, but the investment climate is very good there. But they have entrepreneurs, they have startups, they have high tech. The war is not the biggest problem, but it is important how easy it is to conduct business in that country and what is investment climate there. So the first issue is not the war, but courts are to be working properly. As an investor, you should be sure that if you have problems, you can go to the court, and you should know that there are certain institutions that work. The next thing is that investors should feel that they expected, that it is easy to do business, that there are laws that work, and they work so that investors come and stay in the country. And that is enough if we take the European legislation. We know what investors are looking for. This is not something that you have to invent. We need to start doing it, and the sooner the better for investment climate. Also next, I will not be even saying about fighting corruption. A lot has been mentioned about that, and it's understandable what needs to be done. I talk about e-governance, government all the time. Also the development of ecosystem. The state should understand the less it interferes, the better. But what should the state do? If we are talking about the development of small businesses, about export, about help in exporting, there are different accelerators for startups, incubators. There are many countries where the state is doing it. And we need to say the less the state interferes, the better. But the state should do also a lot. And also, I now understand that in Ukraine there are just 7% of small and medium-sized businesses. especially because Ukraine has been independent for 25 years. But we need to understand that in 1991 there was no private business in Ukraine at all, and there were no incentives. People could not borrow money, could not start businesses, so our fund was investing in 218 companies, and we are sorry that we did not have twice more money, but these 118 companies, each of them had some additional contracts with some other companies. And it was some mini economic zone, but we need many of them in every settlement, in every village. And those large plants, when they close, they need to give jobs to people. And our new program, or the two programs which concentrate on small and medium-sized business, they do have an impact. And Finland, for example, which is a very innovative type of a state, out of 5 new jobs, 4 are created by IT companies. The new jobs are created by startups and by small businesses. Europe, 60-70%, and it would be so important to have not just big investors, but the driver of the economy is not grant, but a big mass of entrepreneurs. And also it is important not just to deregulate, but stimulate new enterprises and new sectors. And also we understand that the state would say what is important to stimulate, what sectors are priority, so that it's not just energy sector. We can be a very good IT state if we have 100,000 IT specialists. That's not a lot, but if these we have 100,000, then we'll have 200,000, and maybe we can have startups like Skype, like Nokia, and as Yaroslava said, this will create the clusters. Finland, again, how has Finland become the country that is very innovative? There was Nokia that was making mobile phones, but that was the cluster. There were companies which were making for this phone some spare parts, details, and one company created the whole sector that developed the great reputation for this whole state. Also Skype in Estonia, there was just Skype when they started looking at it, and they started looking, maybe there's a big potential there. So they were creating the system to build up the potential. It is important that the state encourages it, and Ukraine is looking at big plans, that these are main companies which are so important for the economy, but that's not so. Many of them are closed, many of them do not operate to the full capacity. It is important that the state stimulates and has a policy to develop small and medium-sized business. Then these entrepreneurs would be more encouraged. In other countries, there are different state administrations. In the US, there is a Small Business Administration that gives advice to small entrepreneurs. I want to open a small business in the US. I can go to them. They will tell me how I should register it. They will not be doing it for me. I will find a lawyer who will help, but they will tell me what are the sources of funding and so on. And that stimulates, encourages people who enter the sphere for the first time. So the entrepreneurs will feel that they are needed, that the state needs them. So this memorandum, those who are interested were ready to send it. It's very detailed. These are just the main items, but there are approximately 100 of them. We started to work on them. And as an example, there's a draft law that you can convert the debt into equity and the instrument of private-public investments. The state has some money, but the companies also have, and some companies, some investors are interested in investing if they understand what are the terms. If this is a long-term partnership, and we have a draft law which we're working on PPP, it's important that it is adopted. It will be another instrument for investors. We say that the sale of state companies is one of the instruments, but I believe that it is important. We shouldn't be saying that investors are not interested in Ukraine. The investors are coming. Every week someone is investing into Ukraine. It is important to understand. Don't be so negative to it. Just ask, what else can we do? If you have questions, I have a question. Sometimes the journalists ask, if you had a chance to formulate the agenda for the government for a year, the year has passed, everyone was talking about fighting corruption, about reforms, about big changes. But business is very realistic, sometimes very pessimistic. But what would be your advice to the government? What could be 3 key ideas to be implemented so that what you are talking about starts working, so that the entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized businesses, understand that they are heard and that there are incentives? First, stick to your promises, execute on what you promise. If we say that we will improve investment climate, that we will not conduct any inspections in business, so if we give promises, let's execute. It is very difficult to create the trust. Every inspection, when they promise that there will be no inspection, no readership, and this is a very negative signal. And also execute on all your promises you have given to the government, to Europe, to each other. And don't say that no one is interested in Ukraine. Make steps so that people are interested, and these are understandable steps. It's written everywhere. What are they? I believe they need to start from deregulation, because every entrepreneur in Ukraine, it's all these laws, they have to get the stamps. No one understands why in the very beginning you had these stamps. Someone did it in 1990. I've been working in Ukraine for 22 years. And every year I hear about open windows, simplified, but every administration is saying same thing, but they never do it. They put aside, they cancel 18,000 regulations, but then they create 18,000 more. The Minister of Economic Development is trying hard, but that's the beginning. We need administrative reforms, other reforms, but from the point of view of entrepreneurs, deregulation is mandatory. We can talk about taxes, about customs, but deregulation is what concerns everyone. Thank you. Jaanika, you want to say something? also courts. People say that the prosperity of the US started from just judges, fair judges. Dear colleagues, any other questions? No more questions. I hope that soon you will come back to us and you will tell us about investment contribution and about some projects which are 10 times bigger than what we see today. Everything's in our hands, and the investments will come. The next briefing is in 15 minutes.